Hey everyone, it's Smarty Pants Chess here once again, and again we're going to take a look at another game in the CCC11 semi-finals. This is between Leela Chess 0 and Leelenstein. Again, both sides have 30 minutes on the clock, 5-second increment. In this game, Leela is playing white and Leelenstein is playing black. So the game started with d4 and g6, and the book continued like this. So e4 was played, followed by d6, knight c3 and bishop g7. After the move f4 and knight c6, bishop e3, we have an Austrian attack, which is quite devastating against this sort of modern setup. Knight f6, knight to f3, castles, queen d2 and e6, and here white castled queenside, and this is the end of the book. So here black has a very solid opening, and white has a very attacking opening. So the idea for white is to play moves like g4, h4, f5 and bishop h6. So this is a very aggressive opening for white to play. And black's challenge will be to counteract this by attacking on the other side of the board and trying to consolidate in the centre with moves like d5 or e5 where necessary. So Leelenstein started off with the move b6, which is very logical, going to probably fianchetto the bishop and develop another piece. And here Leela played the move bishop to f2. So I think this bishop f2 move stops moves like knight to g4, because if black plays this, then white can play bishop h4 attacking the queen, and white will gain a lot of tempos here by playing move h3 and g4 very quickly and attacking the knight. So definitely bishop f2 was a great reactive move. And Leelenstein played the move knight to e7. So this could be preparing a number of ideas. Could be preparing c5, d5, and even using this knight to protect the other side of the board and guard f5 as well. So here Leela got on with her job. She played the move e5, so striking at this knight on f6. And I think Leelenstein played the best move, playing knight to d5, because taking on e5 wouldn't really go in black's favour. It would just open up lines against black's king. Leela played knight to e4, so doesn't want to trade knights yet. And I think black did the sensible thing and played a move to attack white. So he played f5. And I think this is better than just sitting back and waiting for white to attack. And of course the logical move is to en passant, which is what Leela played. E takes f6. Leelenstein recaptured, and Leela took on f6. The bishop recaptured. And white develops a piece to bishop to c4, hitting this e6 pawn, and now stops this bishop from developing to b6 because it's protecting the pawn. If black here played the move d5, then white can follow up with bishop to d3, and suddenly black's got a backward e pawn, and this is very susceptible to an attack with one of the rooks going on this open file. In the game, Leelenstein playing queen to d7, so defending the e6 pawn this way with the queen, and Leela now played the move d5, so striking out at this weak e6 pawn. If black continued with, let's say, e5 here, this would be terrible because white would just take, and even after bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, at the end of it there'll be a d6 with a nice check and probably win the knight as well. So after d5 from Leela, black played the move a5 instead. So this is actually a tricky move because it prepares b5 and a4 and will try and trap white's bishop. So after a5 I was looking at numerous options. I thought d takes e6 looked okay, but I think black gains an equal position after queen c6, queen to e2 to defend the bishop and the pawn, but black may be able to play d5, and after bishop d3, queen takes e6, queen takes e6 and bishop takes. It looks as though we've got quite an equal position. So in the game, after the move a5, Leela actually played the move a3 to keep some tension in the centre, and now the bishop has an escape square on a2. Leelenstein continued her queenside attack though and played the move b5, hitting the bishop, but now Leela plays an intermezzo move, d takes e6, so attacks the queen on d7 with a pawn, and white's just won a free pawn. If queen c6 in this position, like we saw in a previous variation, then now white can actually play bishop b3 because the pawn is still protected by the bishop. If black plays d5 here, white has time to play rook e1, If the bishop takes on e6, there's a lot of tricks white can play in this position. For instance, after f5, white can strike out and hit the bishop on e6. The point is that this d5 pawn suddenly becomes rather overloaded, so play could continue g takes f5, but then after knight to d4, bishop takes, white's got a great position, so they're threatening to play queen to g5 check, or even just queen to e2, and try and pick up one of the pieces in the e file. But queen g5 here looks rather devastating for black. And there may be some opportunities for white to even sacrifice a rook on e6 due to this horrible pin from the bishop to b3. After d takes e6 in the game, Leelenstein played queen to e8. So the bishop is still attacked, Leela drops it back to b3. And Leelenstein gave up on this pawn on e6 and played bishop to b7. So suddenly white is actually an extra pawn up and has a better position than black. So now Leela tries to go in for her own attack. Plays the move h4, preparing h5 and trying to crack open black's defences. Leelenstein played a4, and obviously the bishop retreats to a2, but Leelenstein still continued with b4, so again trying to crack open white's defences at the same time. b4 is a good move because if queen takes b4, black will play rook b8, and now black is threatening to take the knight on f3, and the bishop on f6 and the rook on b8 are also targeting the b2 pawn. So after the move b4, white it shouldn't take this pawn off the board. It just leaves their lines too open. For this reason Leela played the move h5, continuing her attack, and Leelenstein played takes and white recaptured. And now suddenly it's black's turn to wonder what to do with their defences. Black actually took on h5 in this position. I think that was wise because the h pawn was just going to take on g6 anyway and open this rook up, so black may as well take a pawn off at the same time. Leela continued though with bishop to d4, trying to trade these two bishops off and gain control of some dark squares. Black played queen to g6 and Leela played the move knight to g5. And black's got a lot of problems here because they can't move this knight off e7 because this bishop on a2 does a great job of guarding the pawn but also threatens e7 ideas. So one piece in black's camp is absolutely useless at this particular moment. With the knight jumping into g5 as well, black's got to make a decision whether to take this bishop on d4 or the knight on g5. I think taking the knight on g5, let's have a look, would actually lead to a bad position after f takes g, because then now white can park the bishop on f6 and start targeting this e7 knight. So in the game after knight g5, Leelenstein actually swapped bishops with bishop takes d4 and white recaptured on d4. And it looks as though black is trying to shut up shop and played the move rook to f5. And after this move, Leela did have some tricks up her sleeve that she could have played. Rook takes h5 in this position was an option, because if queen takes, then they can play knight to f7, threatening mate on h8 with the queen. If knight to g6 to defend this, white can also play g4. The point is, if queen takes g4, there's knight to h6 check, picking up the queen. And if black decides instead to play moves like rook takes f4, then white can play g takes h5, winning the queen. After rook takes the queen, white will recapture. After knight to e7, h6, the material is actually dead even, but white now has a passed e6 pawn with a much better position. For instance, there's moves like rook to g4, even rook to b4 maybe. But white's pieces are far more powerful, and most likely will play rook g4 followed by rook to g7. So this would be a nice victory for white. So back to the game after black's just played rook f5. Rook h5 was definitely possible for white, but Leela opted for rook to h3 instead, possibly preparing to double rooks on the h file, and black played h6, attacking the knights on g5. And now Leela played a rather aggressive move that I don't think I would have ever found. She played the move g4, so what does this do? Attacks the rook on f5, but surely black can just play h takes g4 and attack the rook on h3, and he's now attacking that on g5 at the same time. But now white has a few tricks. They can play knight to f7, again threatening mate on h8. If black blocks this with queen f6, then white can play knight takes h6 check. And if king f8, there's knight takes g4, queen takes d4, rook takes d4, and all of a sudden white is actually a pawn up in a very good endgame. So after this aggressive g4 move by Leela, black has to be rather careful, and actually I think black may have wandered into a lost position already. So in the game, Leelenstein played rook takes g5, and Leela played g takes h5. If white instead opted to take the rook with f takes g5, then actually black can play queen takes g5 with check, king b1 and h takes g4, which should have a great position for black because they've got two connected passed pawns. So after rook takes g5, white should play g takes h5, which is what Leela played, attacking the queen. The queen goes to f5 and hits the rook on h3, but now white plays f takes g5, Leelenstein took the rook, and white played g takes h6, and is now threatening mate on g7. So here, white has actually just given up a piece to have a great attack against the black king. So the black king is wide open now, and Leela actually has two passed pawns, one on the h file and one on the e file. Black here has a lot of defending to do. And again, if the knight ever moves off e7, there's always this e7 move with check, which would be really devastating for black. So actually the only way for black to defend this position is to play the move queen to g3. And Leela swiftly followed up with rook to g1, which is pinning the queen against the king. And the only way for black to defend this is to play bishop g2 to block it. And now Leela comes up with another ingenious move. So the queen on g3 is actually threatening to take the pawn on a3, so white blocks this with c3. But this also helps play bishop to b1, where white will follow up with the move h7. So this move has two meanings behind it. Leelenstein played the move rook to f8, but after bishop to b1 from Leela, you feel like black is suddenly in a lost position. So white is now threatening to play the move h7. Black checked on g5, the king went to b2, black checked again with rook to b8, and the king goes to a1. And it feels like it's game over already for black, because h7 is coming and there's no way to stop it. White still also has this aggressive pin against the king and queen as well. So even if black played a move like queen to e5 here, white will just play rook takes g2, and if king h8, take on e5, d takes e5, and play rook to g7, with a great endgame for white. But back in the game, Leelenstein decided to give up the exchange with rook takes b1 check, and then rook takes b1 was played. So now white is threatening to play rook b8, followed by queen to h8. So black has to play king h7. Leela played rook to g1 and pinning this bishop on g2 once again. So now white is actually threatening to, let's say, even take on a4 or check on e4 and win this bishop. Black played knight to f5 to block any checks most likely, but now Leela played queen to f2 and hits this bishop twice. Black defends with knight to e3, but now white played rook to e1, and now two pieces are attacking the knight on e3. So it jumps in to d5, but now Leela played the move e7, preparing to play e8 queen. Black is forced to take, and Leela follows in with queen f7, and it looks as though black is in a lost position, because if king h8, white will take on e7, and even if queen takes e7, rook takes e7, this should be an easy endgame for white to win. In the game though, Leelenstein played king takes h6, and Leela finished with rook to e6, knight to g6, and Leela captured on g6. The king took on h5, rook takes g5 was played, and then king takes g5. And here possibly black should probably resign, but the game continued on for another 40 moves or so, and I'll just go through that rather quickly. So Leela here could even play moves like rook to g7, just pick up the bishop, but I'll just glide through these moves really quickly because this is an easy victory for white to win. For some reason they just like to mess about. So this is an easy king and queen checkmate, but Leela got a knight instead, and slowly but surely we get a mate. So she sacked a queen for no reason whatsoever, sacked a knight, and after a few moves finally went queen c7 checkmate. So I don't know why Leela does that. It may be a bit of a bug or something, but it was a very nice victory over Leelenstein. I certainly think this opening helped Leela out a lot because it's a rather aggressive system. Black usually has a lot of defending to do in the game. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the analysis of this game. Hope to see you soon, where I'll post more. If you haven't already, please drop a like or subscribe if you did enjoy the video. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.